Peter, it's great that you could catch up with me. I'm super glad we could have a conversation here. I'd mentioned
Yeah,
before that I have a lot of people. It seems like there's a big growing interest in establishing pollinator habitat, which we both
yeah,
know how incredibly important that is. And I just kind of wanted to catch a bit of conversation here between me and you. And I know you have scores of resources and videos that you could share and where people
sure.
could find those, and just have a bit of discussion about that. You want to tell us a
Yeah,
little bit about Conservation
sure.
Blueprint?
Well, first off, thanks for having us on. And this is, I could sit and talk about this kind of stuff all day long because this is
Me
what
too.
our passion is. So,
Yeah.
Conservation Blueprint is a couple of different things. One is it is a company that goes out and actually harvests local ecotype seeds, the
That's
things that
so
are
cool.
kind of really hard to come by. As a wildlife biologist that has spent my career designing, establishing, and managing high quality pollinator projects, it just there were things that it's like, this is a really good thing to put in a mixture and it's not available.
Yeah.
So I kind of developed an interest and spent some time doing that. And then the other thing that we spend lots of our time on is we're a wildlife consulting group. And kind of the magic jam that is happening right now is we're ending up working on lots and lots of solar energy projects that
That's
are
too
going
cool.
in, and our phone rings when people want to have pollinator value associated with the solar energy project. And that interest kind of comes from three ways. One, the solar developer has a sustainability effort where it's just part of what they want to do. Okay. Or number two, the local ordinance language requires that if you
Ooh.
want to put in a solar energy project, you got to have multiple benefits. Okay. Or number three, where the end user of the power, whether it's a corporation or the public, has raised their hand and said, hey, we want to have pollinator value associated with this. And as you and I were sharing before we hit the record button, this is something that it can be one of the key solutions to beekeeping sustainability. Because as somebody that has a lot of friends in the beekeeping industry, I worry about whether or not that's a sustainable job, a sustainable business, a sustainable industry when you look at all the things that beekeeping has to deal with. And it's amazing to me that beekeepers have the ability, with all of those things going on, to keep the boat afloat, so to speak.
Agreed. And I'm a honeybee breeder on the side, mainly focused on host resistance, or natural resistance mechanisms to varroa mite and other pathogens.
Mhm.
So I see that firsthand. And
Yeah.
like we mentioned again earlier too, a lot of people are like, "Oh my gosh, what can I do?" Like, beekeeping is incredibly difficult, just as you mentioned. It's
Yeah.
not something I recommend for everybody. It's definitely not for everybody, but something that everybody can do if you want to help out is, if you've got some fallow ground or even a small part of your yard you don't want to maintain,
Mhm.
or if you've got a 1,000-acre farm you want to do this with, establishing high
Yeah.
diversity pollinator plots are something everybody can do to help out.
Yeah, I was kind of chuckling while you said that because I I jokingly tell people that when somebody comes to me and says, I think I want to be a beekeeper, I want to have some bees, I'm chuckling because I feel like my number one role is to talk them out of it
Yeah,
and to explain to
exactly.
them this is this is really, really hard. And if this is
Yes.
something you're passionate about, spend one full year shadowing somebody,
Yep.
get a mentor, and then figure out how to do it because it's really, really hard. The
Yes.
second thing I would add, Cory, to what you just said is that one of the really encouraging parts about pollinator habitat and having health and habitat benefits is you really can do something with almost
Oh yeah.
anything. The
Absolutely.
while you might not be able to support an entire honeybee hive, a butterfly garden in somebody's backyard produces benefit and has
Yes,
all kinds of critters come to it. So you truly can do something almost anywhere. And if there ever was an example of the if you build it, they will come, it's
that's it.
pollinator habitat.
Agreed. And it's gorgeous. I mean,
Yes.
to add that, it's not like there's a lot of agriculture down here where I'm at, and we got to eat. And I like having cheap food,
Mhm.
so we've
Yeah.
got a lot of that land devoted to that. But on the flip side, there's always a trade-off. It's
Mhm.
whatever you're doing, there's a trade-off. So I think the trade-off to that, would be a lack of habitat and forage. But
Yeah.
if you come in with high diversity plots, that definitely offsets that, and then everything wins. The pollinators win, and whatever you're trying to grow wins, because we both know you're going to have higher production if you've got good pollination.
Yeah. So towards that end, one of the real philosophies that Conservation Blueprint has is when we get an acre of habitat, we have to make it the best it can be. We
Yep.
cannot afford to have something that's kind of,
Hmm.
because we don't have enough of it on the landscape. So
Yep.
when we get some, we have to make it the best it can be.
Absolutely. What's some side benefits that you've seen? I know I've got in my mind a few, but in addition to just beauty of seeing these flowers and whatnot, what all do you see the
Yeah.
ripple effects of it?
Well, I describe pollinators as a unique glue that can connect all kinds of things. And so before I give you the examples of the things that it can connect, I tell people to take the grocery store test. And what that is anybody you meet in the grocery store that one of these things I'm about to list is going to be something that's really important for them, meaning that they can connect almost everybody. Not everybody in the world is interested in being a beekeeper. They're freaked out about being stung, whatever. But the things that pollinators and their habitat connect to are water quality, soil health, food sustainability, renewable energy, honeybees, native bees, monarch butterflies, grassland songbirds, pheasants, quail, right of ways along highways and utility lines and gas pipelines, and a list that's even longer than that. And my guess would be is that going back to that grocery store test that I talked about, virtually everybody you would bump into, one of those things would be important to them, their hot button issue. I
Absolutely.
want clean water. I care about soil health. I care about climate change and want to have clean energy like solar, all of those things. And so, from my perspective, it's an incredibly unique message and an incredibly unique moment in time where we sit right now, where the public has a very heightened level of understanding that there's something wrong with bees. I've heard of colony collapse disorder. I don't know what it means, but I know that there's problem with bees. And further, I know that there's a problem with monarch butterflies.
Right.
Okay. And so there's this heightened level of understanding that there's a problem. I want to do something to help, and I don't know exactly what to do to help, but I'd like to do something because I care about it. That's a really unique opportunity and a
Absolutely.
unique moment in time. And so our conversation today about pollinator habitat and how do you grow flowers and does it make a difference and what do you grow and how do you do it? It's a really good moment in time to have that conversation.
I agree. And it comes up a lot just in conversation locally and, through beekeeping organizations. And, I helped out with the Bumblebee Atlas in Missouri.
Yes.
And so that opened my eyes to a lot. And so
Yeah.
I think it could be a really useful conversation. As far as the benefits I've seen, I put in, it's nothing compared to some of the plots you did, but I did 14 acres here on my little 27-acre farm. And
Mhm.
it it's really, looking back on it, and it's only in its fourth growing season, so it's not at peak yet, I wouldn't say, but it's kind of crazy how much of a difference it makes, just that little plot. Like the amount of bumblebees we see, native longhorn bees and bees. I'm an entomologist technically, and some of them I don't know, the exact species. It's kind of like going down the rabbit hole, but all these things are adoring these flowers, pollinating them, and they're getting nutrition out of it. And I get the beauty of drinking coffee and looking at a wildflower meadow. But it doesn't stop with them. The amount of birds I see now
Mhm.
is crazy, from goldfinches to indigo buntings to just quail, turkeys, and the amount of deer I see in this thing. Like, there's a lot of people that deer hunt where I'm at. I'm a deer hunter as well. Love whitetails. But I think if some of these deer hunters that are putting in all these food plots knew the nutritional value for
Mhm.
lactating does early in the season and just herd maintenance and having that high protein forage, they would at least put a fraction of their food plots in as
Yeah,
wildflower habitat, and then everyone would win. But
yeah.
again, that may be another topic of discussion too. But like you said, just mass amount of benefits of putting these in. So when someone comes to you and says, I want to do this, I'm committed, where do I start? What
Yeah.
would you, where would you direct them?
Well, I would direct them a number of ways. The first thing that I would do is I would probably connect them with a nonprofit that they've never heard of before, called the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund. And that is a nonprofit that we're associated with and support, that provides one-on-one technical guidance. And then they can have access to free pollinator seed mixtures on
Which
projects
is
that are
huge.
2 acres in size or bigger. Okay, 2 acres can be on private land, public land, corporate land, which you should think of as any land.
Wow.
Okay,
Wow.
and does great things. It takes a really unique and innovative approach of establishing two different seed mixtures. Okay, one is called a honeybee mixture, and it includes clover species in the seed mixture. And the second
Nice.
one is called a monarch butterfly seed mixture, and that's all natives. Okay, and oftentimes so these are separate plantings. Oftentimes what we would do is plant, if you had just say a 4 acre project, we would plant 2 acres of the monarch butterfly mix right in the very middle of the project. And then
Mm.
around the outside of it, we would plant the honeybee mix. And the honeybee mix serves and functions as a green fire break, so that we could apply prescribed fire to the monarch butterfly mix that really benefits from fire. That's just some of the innovativeness of how that can happen. So that's number one. Number two is that conservation blueprint. If you follow us on social media, go to our website. Every month we produce a pollinator habitat tip, 2 to 5 minute video that talks about a number of different topics: what plants to put in, how to plant, when to plant, all that kind of stuff, and just provide some guidance in a format that's short
Mm.
and very, very visual, not just somebody sitting there talking. Very, very visual, shows before, during, and after, all of the
Awesome.
things and that sort of thing. So that's some of the guidance that I would provide. But the first thing that everybody should do that wants to have a pollinator project, they should sit down, pull out a piece of paper, and actually list, what are your objectives.
Mm.
Okay. Somebody calls me and says, I'm a beekeeper and I want to help the health of my bees and my honey production. That seed mixture and recommendation that I give might be very different from somebody that calls and says, um, I'd love to do something that looks like prairie restoration.
Hmm.
Okay. Or if somebody called and said, hey, I want to benefit all kinds of stuff, but I'm a deer hunter. That's what I am. And I want to attract and hold deer. Okay.
Mm.
You can benefit all kinds of things with all three of those scenarios I just gave you. But how I would go about designing and recommending your habitat is different based on your objectives.
Good
And
point.
then I guess the other thing I would say is that if somebody is starting out with something that is in existing grass, okay, I want to take this 4 acres over here and we hay it every year, but we don't really get much off of it. And I'd like to make it into pollinator habitat. Taking something that is in existing grass and converting it to pollinator habitat is the hardest platform to work off of. The hardest, bar none.
Just eliminating the grass competition.
Eliminating the grass and the competition that when you look at the area that you see, a lot of density, a lot of competition for light and moisture. You see that above ground. There's just as much competition below ground, where those grasses and their root systems basically fill up the soil horizon and don't give enough room for kind of some of those flower species to become established. So if you were to look at the bee and butterfly habitat funds, pollinator habitat establishment and management guide.
Okay.
Free to anybody that wants it. Go to the website, click on the button, you get it. One of the things that we talk about for site prep in there is called the gold plan. And it's called the gold plan because it is the best. There's all kinds of things that you can do, but the gold plan is to actually take our 4-acre example we've been talking about, that was in existing grass, and plant it to soybeans for 1 full growing season. Okay. Treat it just like it's conventional agriculture. And then that fall, plant your pollinator seed mixture into that soybean stubble.
That's
You've
a good
eliminated
idea.
the grasses, both above ground and below ground. You have a perfect seed bed to plant into, and those soybeans naturally put nitrogen into the soil to give your pollinator planting that boost and just kind of that little rocket shot right at the time when the seed germinates. Phenomenal results. And most people, you know, that we talk to about this kind of stuff would be like, what? You want me to what? What? But the results that you get off of it are just phenomenal. Just phenomenal.
That's
And
a
you
good
can tell
idea.
those differences in year 1, in year 5, and in year 10.
Oh,
That's how
wow.
significant it is.
Man, I wish I would have talked to you before I did mine. I kind of just came up with my own thing. It worked fairly well, but it actually was row crop prior, but it had a short fallow period, so some of the grass and stuff moved in. But I did 2 herbicide applications. I'd have to go back and look to see exactly whenever I did it through the growing season. Then they kept telling me bare dirt, bare dirt, bare dirt is what you want your seeds to be on, which is ties right into what you'd said. Then I rototilled everything. I rolled it. I broadcast seed it, and I rolled it again. And it seemed like I got really good germination, but some of that grass was wanting to move back in. So I sprayed it. Now I didn't have native grasses in there, so otherwise I would have been kind of shooting a toe off maybe. I came back with clethodim, which is a gramicide. It only kills grass, not your broadleaf wildflowers. And I added a non-ionic surfactant to it, and it zapped the grass that was in there. And then everything came in.
You're listing all the points in one of my video habitat tips that tells how to do it. You're doing exactly everything in there.
The USDA office was a little worried that I came back and was going to hit it with a gramicide, but I mean, with understandable, I don't think they had, they probably need to watch your video that you referenced, but
no USDA conservation program is ever very concerned about getting rid of grass. they tend to go really high on the grasses. So if you're like,
Gotcha.
I want to knock the grasses back, that's like not
It makes them
in
nervous.
their wheelhouse. So
Yeah,
it's
gotcha.
understandable. It's
I just kind of
understandable.
went covert and did it anyway. But since then, we've had a field day, the USDA office, National Wild Turkey Federation, Quality Deer Management, Ducks Unlimited. They had a bunch of reps that came out just to check out the
Mhm.
wildflower patch that I
Yeah.
did, and because it turned out so well. But
Yeah.
again, you mentioned before that site prep is absolutely crucial because there's wildflower seeds expensive. Like you said, if you put all this time and money into it and then you don't get much out of it, it's really disappointing. And I've talked to a
Yeah.
lot of people that have had that disappointment. So the
Yep.
site prep is absolutely key. And you said
Yeah.
you could find those videos.
Mhm.
Is it on the Bee and the Butterfly Habitat Fund? It's on their
There are
website.
some there, but Conservation Blueprint will not only have the habitat tips, but webinars that we've given
Oh, nice.
about pollinator habitat establishment, pollinator habitat management. So there's a much longer library on www.conservationblueprint.com. But Cory,
Nice.
if you think about the example in the story you gave where you talked about what you did, I mean,
Hmm.
that was like a 4 or 5 step process.
It
So
was,
you
yes.
check the boxes. Anytime that you go through a process where it's like, I don't have the equipment, I don't have the time, I just want to get it planted. Any corners that you cut, once you put the seed in the ground, you
It's
don't
too
have
late.
nearly as many options for what to do.
Yep.
And then the other thing that I would encourage people to bear in mind when you're planting a mixture like what you did is that in year one, that planting tends to sleep. In
Hmm.
year two, it starts to creep. And in year three, it leaps. So
Yep.
you have to be willing to invest management during that time and to set the appropriate expectation as many of those plants are working on putting their root systems down and not putting their energy into flowers. I'm putting my
Yes.
energy into developing a root system so that when we get a year like we have this year, where it's a little bit dry in my
Yep.
part of the world, and I'm coming
Same
to you
here.
today from central Nebraska, and we're in the extreme drought category 4 out of 5. We don't want to hit the
Ooh,
fifth one,
wow.
but um, you want to have plants that have worked in those first 2 years on setting themselves up so that they can survive in the Midwest and the Great Plains when you have conditions like we have this year.
Hmm. Very true. And it was really shocking how some of those plants, how long they stayed vegetative for, like compass plant, because they have the coolest looking leaves. I would find them like, oh, it's compass plant. And it's there again the next year. And it's there again the next year. Well, this year I've got several that are actually flowering, but I think this is the fourth growing season. And there's a bunch that still aren't,
Yeah.
not the whole population's flowering yet, so, which is really interesting to see. And milkweed, I almost thought I didn't have a great take on it. And now there's a fair bit of it this year. So I don't know if it was just
Yeah.
small, because sometimes like Illinois bundle flower, I'll see those little boogers hiding in there and they just don't get that big.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, they go from, like you were saying, setting that root system and getting established to actually flowering. It's just kind of mind blowing
Yeah.
how that works.
So for the plants you listed there, common milkweed spreads rhizominously. So once you kind of get a couple established plants, then it starts popping up all over the
Yes.
place. And if you ever apply prescribed fire to that project, you will find the year following the prescription of prescribed fire, that common milkweed will just explode. Okay. Then it might back down. And if you apply management again, like prescribed fire, whoosh, it'll just explode again on you.
See, we
Okay.
burned last year. That was the
Compass.
third growing season, I think. And we burned last
Yeah.
year. And this year I see way more of it. So that's funny that it ties right
There
into
you
what you
go.
just
There
said.
you go. Yep. And the compass plant, that's a plant that has a 25 to a 30 foot root system.
What? Are you serious?
So when you're saying, God, it's year 4 and I'm just finally starting to get some to flower, well, guess what it was doing for 4 years?
Wow. That's amazing.
25 to 30 foot root system. But that's how that plant, once you get it established, it's there. And that's also how, when you have a drought year, that plant is still flowering.
It's okay.
Because I'm down where there's still moisture. The drought hasn't gotten to the 20-foot level yet. So
that's awesome.
So that's how that works. And it's, I also would tell anybody that does a project like what you've done, do this: set up a photo point and take pictures from the exact same spot every year, multiple times throughout the year, because what it looks like in year 4 is nothing what it looked like in year 1 and 2. And what it looks like in year 4 will be nothing of what it looks like in year 8. And those changes are so subtle and occur over time that sometimes it's really hard to remember what it looked like, and set up those photo points and appreciate those changes over time as your planting's personality changes and matures.
That's a really good idea. I've taken a few like that, but I get caught up in individual species sometimes. But whenever we did that USDA field day here that I mentioned, there's a church down the road that has a 10-acre planting that was several years ahead of mine. So we visited this one, then went down there. Wow. I mean, it was mind blowing, which obviously they had a bit different mix, but there was still a lot of overlap in species. It was incredible, the difference between the two of a more mature plot. It was something to see.
So for everybody that's listening to this podcast and they're like, well, I wouldn't mind, I'd like to have something like that. Just remember, 1, site prep. Don't skimp on anything. 2, the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund, which you can find on social media, the website, whatever, might be able to give you free seed to do it. And then the technical guidance to how to get all this done before, during, and after the planting. So remember those 2 things. And then the third thing is that even if you don't have something that's 2 acres or bigger, almost any size of something can provide great value.
Absolutely. There's a friend of mine. He works for the Missouri Department of Conservation, and he's got a house in town, and he's just got a little butterfly garden like what you mentioned earlier. And it's gorgeous, so it adds value to the property, and and aesthetically. And then he's constantly sending pictures of what's visiting his butterfly garden, so he gets to see the payoff too, because he's paying attention. That's great, Peter. I think that's exactly what people are going to need to hear.
Yeah. So going back to I want to give you another example, because this is towards what you were just talking about with your friend's butterfly garden. Conservation Blueprint designed the seed mixtures for a really cool pollinator study that's happening in Minnesota, in Southwest Minnesota. And we're doing things like, the research is going to figure out the stocking rate. How many beehives can you put on a planting that's designed this way? They're looking at honey production. They're looking at varroa impacts with higher quality health and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of really cool things going on with the University of Minnesota and the bee lab there. But here's a story I wanted to tell you. So they're in their 4th year probably of when these were planted. And so they're doing all kinds of monitoring and research related to honeybees and native bees and all that kind of thing. And on those plantings, they now have 3 new bee records for the state of Minnesota. Okay.
Really?
So you're like, well, what does that mean? A bee record? What does that mean? They have now identified 3 native bees never before documented in the state of Minnesota that have occurred on those projects. So
That's
remember,
awesome.
almost any project can have benefit. And when we get an acre of habitat, we have to make it the very best it can be. And then you get results like that. And I know that this study is going to document increased honeybee health. It's going to look at things like honeybee and native bee competition that we tend to hear more and more about all the time, which I personally think is the result of less forage on the landscape.
Absolutely.
And if we make
Yes.
every acre the best it can be, a rising tide will float all boats.
Non-issue. Yep,
Yep.
exactly.
And so just think about all those things. Do the site prep right, get the right mixture, and do something. And an entity like the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund can absolutely be a partner to hold your hand and to provide free seed mixtures.
Which that's massive. I know there's probably a lot of variation depending on what species are in it, where you get it, things of that nature. But I know just as a comparison, I did about 14 acres and our seed mix was around, it was over 6,000, but it wasn't quite $7,000. So that's not everybody's got $6,000 or $7,000 sitting around. And again, it could be cheaper depending on where you're getting it. But the
I'm gonna
fact
pull my
that
calculator out while you're talking. 7,000 divided by 14 is about $500 an acre.
Right. And so there's some variation there, but just think about that. If you go through the Bee and the Butterfly Habitat Fund, who's going to show you exactly what you need to do to put it in. So we're not cutting corners. We're getting a good, high diversity, really good stand with maximum benefits. And they give you the seed.
Yeah.
More people should know about that.
And in this monarch butterfly mix, the one that's all native, the minimum number of wildflower species you get is 40. And it's more
awesome.
likely about 60 or 65.
That is too cool.
It really takes that philosophy of when we get an acre of habitat, we have to make it the best it can be. Because if you have 65 wildflower species in there, if it's a hot year or a cold year, a dry year or a wet year, it's early in the planting, it's late in the planting, something in that mixture is going to perform for you. And that's just part of what really makes it the best it can be.
That's too cool. And yeah, that high diversity, we talked earlier about just how I'm in an agricultural area and, I like to eat. I think you probably like to eat too. Most of us do. So we need those pollinators there. So we need a lot of ground, we've developed a lot of ground and, the cities are kind of moving out. So to offset that, so there's not as much competition, if any, between honeybees and natives, we need these plots that are absolutely maximized, like what you said, and that'll offset it. Everybody's happy, they're eating, we have a wide pollinator diversity. So, the stuff we like to eat and the stuff we don't even pay attention to, it's all pollinated. Gotta have it.
Yeah. So 2 thoughts related to that. One, I absolutely believe there's room for conservation, pollinator habitat, on every farm and ranch in the country.
Absolutely.
No doubt about it. And it can be applied in a way that helps address resource concerns on a farm and ranch, increase their return on investment per acre, et cetera. That can work great. The other thing is that if you're an acreage owner or you're a beekeeper that has apiaries set up with a private landowner, there's a lot of opportunity to work on taking some of those areas that are in existing grass and convert them to high quality pollinator habitat. 1, following the gold plan, and 2, remembering that in year 1, it sleeps, in year 2, it creeps, and in year 3, it leaps. And just remember that timeline and that perspective. So, Cory, there's an old saying that goes something along the lines of, when is the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago.
Right.
Plant a tree today. So it doesn't take 20 years for pollinator habitat to do good things, thankfully. But, my point out of telling that story is, let's get going. This is something that you're interested in. Let's get working on the site prep. Get a hold of the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund or whomever, and let's get something started and get something going, because it's really, really important.
Agreed. It affects all of us.
Yep. So let's do it.
Peter, that's completely awesome. I'll some of the links that you said, like your the Bee and the Butterfly Habitat Fund, I'll put that in the body description below.
Yep.
Conservation blueprint. Is there anything else you can think off the top of your head? That pretty much covers.
When you provide a link to the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund, they'll be able to access that habitat guide and things. But if you put a link in there that, boom, just is directly to that, it's probably easier for some people to get to it, and possibly a link directly to those different webinars and habitat tips and that sort of thing.
Beautiful.
So, yeah. And then, we're both Conservation Blueprint and the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund have Facebook page, Instagram, LinkedIn, all of that stuff. So those things are always great as well to let people know about them.
Well, Peter, I can't thank you enough for taking time to chat with me here. I think people are going to get a lot of use out of this video, and hopefully we can get a whole lot more acres of diverse pollinator plot in. So
how will I get a link to it so we can help amplify it for you?
I'll send it to you if that works. And then I'll send you an email as soon as we get off of this. Once I get it put online, I'll send it to you, and then we can edit it as needed and go from there. And any links you want me to add, I'll do some digging too, so we make it as, like the pollinator plots, make it as useful as we possibly can.
Yeah. So I can also, if you want to inject them into the podcast, I can send you like images of what
that'd be perfect.
The honeybee mix looks like, the monarch mix, and just that kind of stuff.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. I'll actually do that right now before I forget about it.
That's what I'll do too.
Yeah. And if you ever want to have, a podcast conversation like about renewable energy and the opportunities there, I think that's really exciting, and we could absolutely fill a bunch of time talking about that and really challenge people to raise their hand when a solar project is coming into their area and say, hey, is there going to be pollinator value in that? Because we want that.
Exactly. Kill two birds. You might as well. It's just like the plots, making the absolute most out of it. You can get a ton of renewable energy and take care of the pollinators and wildlife too.
Yeah.
It's a win-win.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd absolutely love that. Well, I'll stay in touch with you here, and we'll find a time that works out. And I don't think there's a substitute for these long form discussions like this too, to where you can pick stuff apart. I feel like maybe it's just me, but it seems like you can get a lot more out of it. There's a lot more meat on the bone.
Yeah, I agree. And I love doing them. So thank you for reaching out.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
All right. You bet.
See you,
Have
Peter.
a great day.
You too. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, bye.
Bye-bye.